We're back, everybody, at Blogworld New Media Expo for our final interview. You're our last interview. Daniel J. Lewis from the Noodle Network, Noodle.mx. You do a variety of shows. I mean, you have one of the ones that I've actually listened to a lot is the Audacity podcast.
Yeah, it's a how-to podcast, so I get really in-depth on talking about what are some of the specifics about podcasting, the steps, and also I really like to do this niche kind of content, like give out those great titles of episodes, 5 ways to do this, or 6 awesome tips to do that.
Well, podcasting has really evolved over the last couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
How long have you been doing podcasting or been involved in podcasting?
I started my first podcast, which was the Ramen Noodle Clean Comedy Podcast, my flagship podcast, in 2007. I didn't take podcasting seriously until 2009.
How did you get into it?
It was, I was super thrilled to meet Callie Lewis here at Blogworld because one of her episodes a while back of Geek Brief said, just do it. And I had this idea of doing some comedy, just telling some funny stories. Wasn't sure if it would work out, but then I heard someone else do something very similar to it. And it was the old podcast, You Suck at Web Design.
You Suck at Web Design,
where you've listened to it, where the guy tells funny, exaggerated stories about being a web designer, and I'm a web designer, so I realized, hey, I could do the same thing. So that's how my podcast started.
I'm sorry. So don't you actually help guide people as far as developing and evolving their podcast? Or I mean, I thought I read some stuff about that on LinkedIn that you basically give people advice as well.
Yeah, I host the Audacity podcast, and that's where I love talking about podcasting too.
Right.
And especially like using the tool Audacity. That's not all I talk about, but yeah, so I help people start podcasts and host them myself and really enjoy it.
How has it changed since 2007? I mean, there's been so many different, the bubble kind of bursted around that time. So you came in at just when it was kind of, people were starting to pod fade. How has it changed for you as a podcaster? How has the industry changed?
Well, what I really see changing in podcasting is not so much for us content creators, because we still have to create great content, we still have to promote it, and we still have to publish it. But how it's changing is how we're distributing it, how we're promoting it. Like when you look at technologies like Stitcher, people don't subscribe to a podcast on Stitcher.
Yeah.
People on Stitcher don't have to know about RSS. They just press play and they can be anywhere streaming
on demand
live.
there in the cloud pretty much.
Yeah, and I see that merging between live and pre-recorded stuff a lot, and also the ability to host something live on the internet is a lot easier now, because even with certain services out there, you can host something live that people can watch live on their phones or on their iPads without having to install anything.
Now, are you doing your shows live?
Yes.
Where do you what kind of CDN do you use to broadcast?
Right now I'm using livestream.com because they are mobile friendly. And they have a great platform there. I'm looking at maybe some other technologies in the near future of testing.
I think the live aspect of it has really matured over the last couple of years, because services like Stickam, Ustream, Justin TV, Livestream have kind of understood how to deliver this content consistently.
Yes.
I know Spencer has been broadcasting on Stickam for a while. We syndicate his show.
I used to just basically put a webcam in my studio. I was started off in terrestrial radio, and I was at Westwood One in Los Angeles, put a webcam, signed up to Stickam, and all of a sudden people were watching. And I think they liked the voyeuristic aspect of being in my studio while I was doing my radio show.
And I have a live chat room running while we're recording.
So, yeah.
And some of the people will deliberately try to make me smile or try to distract me as they tell a joke in the chat room.
And that's a tiny little thing to many people, but that is how you connect with the audience. You're building the relationship, and you're connecting on this personal level with the host. And I think that is what we are able to deliver. That's something that traditional media cannot
and I
do.
think that's important. A lot of people kind of resist that, and they try to keep focused and do their thing. You have to give your chat audience attention.
Yes.
And if someone makes you laugh, and even if you're in the middle of a thought, just laugh. And actually, you could talk to the screen, and people realize, wait a second, this is really interactive. I can be a part of this. Even if I'm not calling in, I can be part of something that traditional radio never allowed me to be a part of.
One of the other podcasts we host, which is now our most popular podcast, is called Once Podcast. It's at oncepodcast.com. It's about the TV show Once Upon a Time.
Which is one of my favorite shows.
Awesome. You
Yeah.
should listen to my
Yeah,
podcast.
that's very cool.
But a lot of people join the chat room while we're recording, and they want to throw out their theories, and that's where we can definitely say, we'll say, well, Bob Smith 218
Yeah.
asks this, or he showed this great theory saying this, and they love hearing that. They love seeing that, and it's building that community.
Yeah, because it's this automatic bond that you guys have because of the things that you like. I think that's something that we are able to do. But we're seeing traditional media do that with their after shows and their pre-shows for certain types of content, and that is strictly adapted from internet broadcasting.
Yes.
That is not something that traditional media. MTV would have never had a wrap-up show for a TV show, or we wouldn't have had a wrap-up show after The Walking Dead, for example. There's a Walking Dead wrap-up show, and that is a podcast that they put on in video form on a major network. And this is things that they have adapted from us that we started doing. Where do you see it going? Where do you see podcasting headed in the next couple of years?
I think, I really hope it will become easier for non-geeks to be able to subscribe, because I think it's important for people to subscribe. That way they automatically receive it. But I think that way that they're going to subscribe will become easier. Like not just iTunes, but things maybe built into systems, built into the Android phone or Windows phone. And we're seeing things like Stitcher being built into cars in the near future. And I think we're going to see more of that, where it'll be so much easier to just plug in and be able to listen to this content and just pick it up from wherever. So you could be driving in the car, you're halfway through an episode, then you get in the house, you just press play and you're resuming from where you left off. And so I really think that distribution, we're going to see it in more places that make it easier for people who aren't geeks like you and me to be able to subscribe and be a part of this.
Well, let me ask you a question. Coming from terrestrial traditional radio, I definitely see a decline in radio. Do you think, how do you think this is going to affect the evolution of radio? Do you think eventually, we're talking about Stitcher, do you think, we know there's iHeartRadio. Do you think, hopefully, do you believe that, I just lost my train of thought, guys. I just lost my train of thought again.
Well, do you think
I haven't had any food this week.
In 3 days.
In 3 days, and no sleep. I guess my question is this. Do you think radio is going to really adapt the way that they should, or do you think they're just going to eventually die out and we're going to be listening to internet radio in our cars only?
I don't think radio will die. I don't think it needs to die. It's like, when are books going to die?
Right.
Well, there are always going to be books. People love the feel of paper, turning pages, and sure, there's other technology out there. But when it's TV, live TV going to die, I think people love being able to just turn on something and hear noise.
Right.
And that's sometimes what radio and television
And
are.
the reason I ask you that is because you don't come from radio. You are, like you said, you're a podcaster. You're a tech geek. You're a guy that started broadcasting in this, in this medium. I'm a guy from radio. I see the changes in radio and what's happening to radio. And I got to tell you, they are struggling, and I think they're getting a little desperate. So I was just, curious to know, what you thought about that.
And I think we'll see some of these traditional media start jumping into the new media of really not just repurposing their content, but starting to pamper to that content and adapt and keep that context in mind as they're recording traditional media,
right,
making it adaptable for others.
Well, is that something that people like you and myself should fear? Because we are not. We have followings, but we are not traditional celebrities. And when we do see someone like an Adam Carolla or like a Kevin Smith come on board to podcasting, some people fear that. Some people look at that as, well, you're invading my space, you're taking away viewers.
I love that.
I do too, because I think it brings legitimacy and it brings more of a mainstream following to what we are doing. If you like Adam Carolla, for example, you may start searching over on Stitcher, and you might find my show, or you might find your show. And that's how I see it. I think it's more eyeballs to what we are doing.
And more recognition in the space.
That's right.
And I think competition is a good thing, because it helps us focus more. So, like, I host the podcast about podcasting. There are several other podcasts about podcasting. So I take a unique approach, and people who listen know they're going to get that unique approach. And even if we're all talking about the same topic, we're approaching it from different angles. So the people who are listening get a three-dimensional picture painted.
Yeah.
Well, and I look at it like this. There's technology podcasts. There's so many tech podcasts out there. Everybody is doing something different. because everybody's giving a different angle on this. Everybody's giving a different opinion on a certain topic. I think there's more room than people think there is.
Look, I say this all the time. I run message forums in my field, and we have the most popular message forum on the internet right now. However, there's constantly chatter about other forums, and guys are linking to other forums, and I never looked at that as competition. I think, people are going to look at things from different perspectives, and if you can provide someone options from your own, resources, like, for instance, if there was another hair loss show, I would be like, great, you know what, this guy has a different perspective, check this out. But a lot of people really are keeping things close to their vest. They get very jealous, and they're not interested in really, and you don't seem, obviously you're not that type of guy, they don't seem really interested in sharing, and they don't like competition. You made a great point. Competition is great because, to me, it just grows the field.
And it can be discouraging, like when you put your podcast out there and you see, you're competing with major celebrities.
Sure.
Yeah, that's disappointing. But then again, do the major celebrities have the chance to connect with their audience the way that we do?
No.
Absolutely not.
So we can build relationships. They don't.
They don't,
Yeah.
exactly.
I agree with you. Daniel J. Lewis, everybody, from the Noodle Network, Noodle.mx.
Yes, Noodle Mix Network.
Noodle Mix Network, Noodle.mx. Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time, and I appreciate what you're doing, and you're doing a great job. I think what you're doing is extremely helpful to people, and it's much appreciated. I know that from many people, that because people have come up and say, "Oh, do you know Daniel? Do you know Daniel? Do you know Daniel?" Now I do, and I really appreciate you coming on.